Hi everyone, I'm Jen Stowe and I'm here with Rob Rodriguez and we are dynamic family strategists from Free Family Recovery Resource Experts.
And today we're going to be talking about a solution focused philosophy versus a diagnosis focused philosophy in terms of working with families.
I think Rob and I would both agree that when families come to us, they're often stuck trying to figure out exactly what to call, the cluster of behaviors that they're seeing in a loved one or in their family at large. And we try to very compassionately redirect them to focus on what they're doing about those behaviors, how they're relating to them, how they're internalizing what is happening in their family and between themselves and the loved one in general.
And in terms of internalizing, I think the media and our field as a whole has probably done a disservice to families with providing them lots of diagnoses and not necessarily a solution. And families tend to internalize those diagnoses. They tend to kind of make it a fabric of their life, and it's important for us to help them unpack that.
When I think about that now, we have a lot of families that come to us and they have many diagnoses for one person. And while I think a real good, clean, proper diagnosis can be very important to inform treatment and to inform therapy, we often see families who are just completely hung up on what are we calling this as opposed to what are we doing about this? How are we changing the way we relate to it? How are we changing the way we relate to each other? And so most of the families who come to us with many diagnoses, and they come to us still very, very stuck in the dysfunctional or destructive behavior patterns that they've been in for oftentimes many, many years.
I've often told families, I don't want to hear one more word about a diagnosis. I don't want to hear any more. I want to hear about how you are interacting with this and how it's affecting you emotionally and mentally and even physically. And let's unpack that.
Right.
And let's look at how we can make changes, because if it is a genuine diagnosis, it's probably not going to go anywhere. So rather than wanting to change a person's behavior that we're focused on, how does a family as a whole change their interaction and, like you said, their relationship with this illness?
Right. So really being able to help families, regardless of the diagnoses, figure out how do we change in a very functional, effective manner so that everybody is a little healthier, as opposed to just, ruminating and spinning in the same dysfunctional behavior patterns that they've had for a lifetime, maybe.
Yeah. And in the case of substance use disorders, for instance, we have, you referred to this as the mirror effect, and we have a set of behaviors that is driving us as family members, is driving us crazy. What we invariably find is that the family can easily identify that all those same behaviors that you're observing on this individual, you are also doing. In terms of how you interact with this person. You're not being as honest as you could be. Maybe you're keeping secrets. Maybe you are isolating yourselves from other members of extended family. And that puts a whole family system under a lot of stress.
Yeah.
And the first thing we do is highlight those, that the person who is struggling with this disorder is probably suffering a lot. They're going through a lot of stress and distress, and if we can help them shift that perspective, then we start looking more at how do we change the way we behave around it.
I think it becomes very empowering for families too. So when we're focused so much on what the diagnosis is, it's almost like we're sort of handing that over to someone else, as opposed to reminding families that regardless of what we call this cluster of behaviors, they're experts in their own lives. They have lived through this more so than either Rob or I or any other, clinician or professional who would diagnose either their family or someone in their family with some type of disorder. That they know what it's like to live with this cluster of behaviors. And again, they're experts in their own lives, so how do we empower them to change the way they are living with that, regardless of what they call it? And in the presence of substance use disorder, you have so many people who come in and they look bipolar, or they look psychotic, and they're actually not those things.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we start to, as Rob said, unpack a lot of what is actually happening so that we can manage and begin to transform the actual behaviors at play, as opposed to the label.
Yeah, I can think of a couple that I was working with. What happened was that we started to discover that we had a distancer pursuer relationship, kind of a complementary thing going on between them. And the more she pursued, the more he distanced. And it turned out that she had become sort of dependent on him for her own happiness. So she wasn't generating any of this internal self-esteem or, doing worthwhile things for herself. So we started to shift the focus and started to look at that. And she started to do activities and projects, because I'm a big assignment guy. Mm-hmm. And she started, she acquired a mentor at work. She was picked, so is the dichotomy, she was picked for a leadership course, a Carnegie leadership course at work, while at the same time thinking, I am not worthy of this, I am not worthy of anything of that fashion. So it turns out that the more we work, the more she's blossomed into a more self-integrated, believing in herself more, looking at herself as a worthwhile human being, whether he comes back or not. That was tough for her to ponder. Whether he can remain your husband or not, you need to do this for yourself. And lo and behold, he started coming back more, and they started to interact more. And we're still working with them, but that's sort of where, the focus is on the diagnosis of alcohol. He's an alcoholic. And we discover that, we're going to have to do something about this drinking, but maybe there's more to it than that.
I think the big takeaway that Rob and I would both agree on for all families is that you have to look beyond the label, right? So beyond the diagnoses, because information isn't transformation. And I think with all of the families that we work with collectively and individually, our big question is, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? So we want to see action, which is why we give assignments, why we give homework, why we're really looking at, if you know better, hopefully you'll do better, but not always. So how do we really encourage and empower families to do better and not just know what we're calling something, but really how do we change action in life? I think trying to be solution focused, it really is a lifestyle, it's a mindset. I think that we both try to practice what we preach in real life. And so as I encourage my families to really look at what is the story you're telling yourself in your head and how is that impacting the way you behave. I have to do that for myself too. And so I have to be willing to look at how am I interacting with my own children. We're all human. We do this for a living and we help families, but in our own lives we need outside eyes on us and we need to be able to reach for help. So my 7-year-old can still bring me to my knees on any given day, and I have to ask myself continually the same questions I encourage families to ask. So in any given situation, what do I have control over right now in this moment? And so if I have a 7-year-old who's acting out, or a spouse or a partner who's acting out, what do I have control of right now to manage? And that might be my voice, my breathing. How do I calm myself down? So how do I actively seek a solution in this moment, as opposed to how do I continue to behave in a way that perpetuates the problem? And it's a challenge, and it takes real mental force. It takes real mental discipline, and it takes practice, like anything else. You've got to exercise that muscle in the same way we do when we exercise our bodies.
For a long time in my life, fear dominated me. Not only did it dominate me, but I was taught you're not supposed to be afraid. I was taught that we hide fear, that we run away from fear, and we avoid fear at all costs. And in the work that I have done for myself, fear is my greatest teacher now. Fear is my friend. Fear is something that I need to embrace because I am living in it most of the day. I am afraid of what I might say to this person and how it might hurt them. I'm afraid of what I might say at home or do at home and how it impacts other people. So shifting that perspective that the greatest high I have today is overcoming fear is what really drives me. What would I tell a client to do here? And how come I'm not doing that?
Right.
And challenging myself constantly to do that. Recently, it's funny, recently I had a conversation with my son. We love each other, I'm sure. But we struggle with saying that to each other. We struggle with really being intimate with each other. And so we had a good talk about that. How do we solve that? So we decided, let's start talking about one little tiny thing, the size of a cigarette. Let's start talk about that and how we feel about that. And as we get that win under our belt, we'll build up to something higher. And eventually we might be started talking about how we really feel about each other. And that would be a great thing for me.
But I think the idea is we try to make it manageable. You take on fear, that's a huge thing, but how do we take these big concepts in our own lives and try to make them manageable? And that's what we try to do for our clients too. I think we're all human and we all mess up, but it's nice to have it's nice to have a therapist's voice in my own head sometimes, I would say, asking myself those questions. What would I tell my client to do right now? Allows me to separate from maybe the interaction that I'm having in that moment, the emotion that I'm having in that moment, and come up with a better solution than I want to do. But that's all I got.